A very happy 5783 to you, and welcome to a new season of Treasures of the Torah. I'm Pastor Matt McEwen. I'm so glad to be with you as we are preparing for the Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom to you. This week, as we start all the way back at the beginning of the Torah in the book of Bereshit in Genesis, I want to read to you from a wonderful commentary that I got while in Israel with Rabbi Shapira, called The Wellspring of the Torah. And this particular commentary that is referenced in this particular Torah portion is Sefer Shimon Hamor. And this is really interesting. This verse, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. It's very familiar to us. Those of us that speak English, that is the order in which the words are given. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. So if we were to translate this literally into English, it would say, in the beginning created God the heavens and the earth, which is true as well. And even though it sounds a bit backward to us, that is acceptable, especially in older forms of English. But the sages relate to us that the reason they flipped it on purpose while translating it for King Ptolemy is that they didn't want it to seem that God, God forbid, was created. So they started the verse, God created in the beginning. Even though that's not a literal word-for-word translation, it's more correct in the mind of the landing language. It's the way that we would even speak it in English. It's how we translate it. The verse literally would be translated, in the beginning created God the heavens and the earth, but we flip it because it sounds better to our ears. This is so important. The idea that God created everything, but He is Ein Sof. He's without an end. He's without beginning. He is just eternal. It's something so difficult for our human minds to apprehend, this idea of an eternal God, a being without a beginning or an end. But that's just the way that it is. So when we translate the Bible, it's important that we understand that every language is going to carry with it its own issues, its own biases. It's going to carry with it a value added that is not intended. And this is why we always tell people when they ask what translation of the Bible is best, well, what is best is the original languages of the Bible, those being Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. That's the best way to read the Bible. No translation is perfect, and so, at least for me, when I'm studying, I like to keep several around. And of course, I like most of all, especially when I'm dealing with the Tanakh or with the Torah in particular, I especially like to look to the Hebrew to see what's going on there. Because not only do we get a different flavor when we read from the Hebrew, but as we've talked about before, there are layers of interpretation in the Hebrew that we simply don't get in the English. The Jewish people study the Bible in a way of 4 layers, and we call this the Pardes. And it stands for the Peshat, or the plain meaning of the text, the literal meaning of the original language. Then we have the Remez, which means a clue, so something that is a little bit beneath the surface. We have the Drasha, or the Drash, which is like a sermon or an object lesson. And then at the deepest level, we have the Sod. Now, whatever language you translate the Bible into, you're only getting that very first layer of interpretation, that layer of the Peshat. And there are so many things that are much deeper. Let me give you just a quick example of that. So the Bible starts with in the beginning, and in Hebrew, this is just one word, Bereshit. Just one word. Reshit means the head of something, the start, the beginning of something. And this preposition of the B sound means in. So in the beginning. Now what's interesting is the sages ask the question, why doesn't the first verse of the Torah start with the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet? I think it's a fair question. As someone who loves symmetry and design and art and things like that, I think it would be quite poetic if the Torah, the very first verse of the very first book of the Torah, would start with the very first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. But that's not how it goes. It starts with the second letter, the letter Bet. And the sages ask, why? Well, we could talk about how there was nothing, and then there was stuff. There was nothing at all, and then there were things, planets and luminaries and land and sea and animals, and then eventually people. We could talk about there was nothing, and then there were things. And if we look at the shape of the Hebrew letter Bet, that's exactly what we see. It has three sides, you see. It has a closed end, and then it has an open end. And as Hebrew is read right to left, and depending on how you're viewing me right now, I'm not sure if I should be making it like this or like that. But anyway, we read right to left. And so to the right, there's nothingness. There's a closed end. But then to the left, it opens up. This can be a picture of the beginning of creation to us. But also it's interesting that Bet is the first word in the word Ben, or the first letter in the word Ben, which means son. And we know, as believers in Messiah, that everything was made for and everything was made through Mashiach. Everything is made through the Messiah, the Son. And so, in the beginning was the Word, the Gospel of John begins. It's a midrash on Genesis 1. And so through that word, who we know as Yeshua, through that word, everything was created. And so in that way, it's quite appropriate that the beginning of the Bible starts with a Bet. It starts with the letter of the Son. These are just some amazing things that we can pick up in the Hebrew that we don't recognize when we're reading it in English. So I'm really hoping and praying that this year will be a meaningful year for you. I'm going to do the Treasures of the Torah a little bit different this year. We're going to be a little more conversational. And I hope you enjoy that. I hope it speaks to your heart. And also, with God's help, maybe sometimes we'll be on location. Maybe we'll be outside in nature. We'll just have to see how it goes. I want to thank you for joining me and for paying attention to this teaching every single week. If you enjoy my teaching, it's only the way that it is because I learned from great rabbis in a great school, a great yeshiva. Yeshiva is the way that we say a Jewish seminary, and it comes from the word that means to sit. You sit and study. And I did that for over 5 years, and I graduated, and I even was ordained as a Moreh Torah, a Torah teacher, after my completion of my studies at Yeshivat Shuvu. And you can study there too. Go to shuvu.tv and fill out an application. We'd love to hear from you. I do want to warn you that we have a constant backlog of applications because so many people are wanting to learn. There's such a thirst for Torah knowledge. And since there's a lot of bad information on the internet, there's a real thirst and a hunger for true Torah knowledge, for good kosher teaching. So go there, shuvu.tv, fill out an application, and you can learn with me and many other teachers, and especially our rabbis Shapira and Bernstein. Thank you so much. I wish you a Shabbat Shalom for you and your family, and a happy 5783. Let us go into this year walking out our faith in Yeshua in the way that He wants us to. May God richly bless you. Shabbat Shalom.